So I picked up Project Cars 2 over the weekend, and even though I didn't play the original title, I thought I'd give it a go. The game was created by Slightly Mad Studios and published by Bandai Namco, and while it is an addition to the racing sim genre, it takes a slightly different approach than the Forza franchise, which has a sequel releasing in under a week. Instead of focusing more on visual displays and customizations like the Forza series, Project Cars 2 takes a more Gran Turismo or iRacing route, focusing more on the actual racing experience than the cars themselves. The major selling points of this game are the dynamic weather system, which causes players to adjust their driving based on surface conditions, and the variety of motorsports that are covered in the game. So, does this game meet expectations, and who is this game directed towards? Let's take a look. Before we get too far in this review, I want to make this clear. I'm not really trying to give the game a blanket good or bad rating. I want to cover some of the general notes over the quality of the game, but the main thing I want to discuss is the audience that this game suits and how its design affects its reception outside of the target audience. I feel that what you expect from this game affects how you will receive this game, so I want to talk about how it feels to play this game from different positions. It's kind of a confusing concept, but let's talk about some of the general features first. First off, I think that the weather and surface conditions that Slightly Mad created for Project Cars 2 is spot on. I've played quite a few different racing games over the years, and while I don't consider myself much of a hardcore racing fan, I found that the handling was a lot different from most of the games I've played. I know Forza Horizon 3 has slightly different handling in the rain and deep puddles that will absolutely destroy your steering, but this is the first game I've legitimately hydroplaned in. Plus, I found the way that the AI changed their driving habits drastically, like slowing down and driving in file to create dry lines, was really interesting. There's probably other games that lean towards the more hardcore sim side that have been doing this for years, but I thought this system created a more dynamic experience from the norm that I'd like to see become a norm. A lot of games have their handling change with the weather, but they still basically keep the same pace. I'd love to see things like weather become more of a factor in the games in the future, because it breaks the monotony that most racing games suffer from. The other thing I really appreciated in Project Cars 2 was the amount of content that it brought. This game has everything from go-karts to IndyCar, and covers that expands well enough that players get hooked on this game will stay hooked for a while. I also like that you can start out in a handful of different divisions and progress through them, instead of slowly increasing in class as the game moves on. You can't start out as a pro racer, but it is designed in such a way that you have a lot more choice in what you want your experience to be. Even though a lot of series have been branching out from their bread and butter, I feel that they struggle with providing a solid amount of content for each branch. In the end, they treat them more as side dishes than they do core aspects of the game. Even though I've yet to experience the full game because of the sheer amount of content and some of the difficulties we'll talk about later, I feel that Project Cars does provide a great bang for your buck. Another small feature I really enjoy is the online multiplayer experience and baked-in esports functions. While they're not minor features in the slightest, I just want to touch on them briefly because I do most of my racing offline. I really like the ranking system they put out with this game. Instead of just tracking performance, Project Cars 2 also tracks racing etiquette. People that constantly bump and crash into other players will have a low racecraft score, and will only allow to be played with similar players. As someone that has stayed away from online racing because of the conduct of other drivers, especially at my skill level, I think this will maybe get me into online racing. For low level players, racing online kinda sucks because most of the riffraff that causes accidents are low level players, which in turn probably causes a lot of people to go back offline. If this system actually works well, it could be a huge step forward for online racing. As for esports functions, they look cool, but their usefulness is really going to be decided later on. I appreciate that the developers are supporting esports from day one, but the support that they give in the following months is going to be a lot more important. So even though I enjoyed a lot about this game, there is one flaw in the general gameplay that really bugs me: graphics. The gameplay from the PC version looks really good, but this game looks like an Xbox 360 game on the Xbox One. The artists for this game did a really good job paying attention to detail, but that detail isn't reflected as well on console. I own the basic model of the Honda Civic that came in the Day 1 edition package, and I can see, especially in interior on the details that both of the models have, that they really did their homework on their cars. However, that detail didn't keep their cars from looking dated. Compared to Forza, which is known for their great visual displays and has a new game coming out in less than a week, the models look like they're competing against Forza Motorsport 4 rather than 7. The environment also looks extremely bland and basic as well. The PC version is definitely more competitive in today's market, but the downsizing that took place to get this game to run on consoles is incredibly noticeable. The tree textures are simplified to a pretty bare bones level, and there's a noticeable aliasing on pretty much everything. If you look up at the rear view mirror, you can see Gran Turismo 3 creeping up on you. This is weird because it's the exact same hardware that run much better looking games. These problems are probably due to a much smaller budget compared to the Gran Turismo and Forza series, but this still detracts slightly from the game. For the most part, I think this game is solidly built. The game's mechanics work and create an experience that is extremely authentic and fun to play. There's enough content in Project Cars 2 to keep players entertained for a while, and has an opportunity to become a staple within the genre. However, there's one caveat to this game. its difficulty. The mechanics of this game make it a lot harder than the average racing game. While I can't knock a game for being too easy or too hard, Project Cars 2 difficulty creates a situation where enjoyment of this game is really dependent on your expectations going in. At the same time, this game's difficulty opens up a problem in its accessibility to the casual player. Honestly, when I first went into this game, I absolutely hated it. I didn't play the first game and I didn't really do extensive research before this game came out, so while I kinda knew what I was getting into, I didn't have a lot of knowledge of this game. It took me a long time to get through my first race because I didn't understand the handling of the game and I kept running off the track and into walls. Even after tweaking my settings and getting a handle on the controls, I still wasn't getting anywhere because this game is a lot harder than it looks. It's unforgiving. Every bump and nudge will make you lose control and pretty much every accident is unrecoverable, just like a real race. There's no rewind feature, meaning that if you want to restart, you have to restart from the beginning. While this is happening, the game's throwing penalties and messages at me for doing things that I really don't understand. I typically do well in other racing games, but the comforts I took for granted made me soft. In this game, I was a complete beginner. The difference between Project Cars 2 and the majority of the racing genre is that most games are designed so that a beginner player can come into the game, pick up the controls, and start doing well. As their skill increases, they can up the difficulty so that the game stays competitive. Project Cars 2 has the same system, but keeps the skill floor a lot higher than most games, meaning that the time and effort it takes to begin playing at a successful level is a lot higher. This isn't a game you can master within a couple days. It takes a lot of practice to get to the game's default skill level. This really isn't a problem because I don't expect games to cater to the casual crowd, but I think most games like this should at least try to make it accessible to them. If they made you do a couple laps in a tutorial race and gauged your difficulty off of that, I think easing into this game would have been a lot more natural. Instead, they throw you in with an average difficulty and don't tell you anything else. I didn't even know I could change the difficulty until I saw it in a loading tip after a couple days. I can forgive a game for being hard, but I don't like it when they remove any accessibility from it. So whether or not you like Project Cars 2 depends on what you want out of the game. If you're a skilled player that's looking for a challenge, then this game is perfect. The amount of content in this game and the promised esports support by the developers is going to keep you playing for a while. Minor issues aside, this game is really well built. However, if you're not a die-hard racing fan and you aren't looking for something that is going to take a lot of effort and practice so that you can win or even finish races, I'd suggest probably picking up Forza or another similar game. This game is built for enthusiasts at its core and doesn't leave a lot of room for beginners.